A man wanted by police for Thursday's deadly shooting in Miami Gardens is in custody tonight. Today, a judge refusing to give Sylvester Takeem Jordan a bond. Jordan faces second-degree murder and use of a firearm while committing a felony charges.
Welcome to Shocking True Crime. Thanks to all our viewers and subscribers for your support. Stay with us for daily updates on the most shocking true crime stories. Don't forget to subscribe.
Thursday, December 17, 2025. Just after 7 p.m. The kind of evening that feels ordinary, at first. But in an instant, everything shifts. Miami Gardens. A neighborhood known for its quiet charm, now shaken by a moment no one would forget. In a dimly lit home, a confrontation is about to erupt. A man, already wounded, lies on the porch, his breath shallow. And then, a countdown begins. 5, 4, 3, the sound of it, a brutal, terrifying countdown, echoes through the quiet street, leaving no room for escape. No time for pleading. Just 5 seconds to make a decision. 5 seconds. That's all it took for a life to be erased. And with it, a family shattered. Inside that house, his wife, his stepdaughter, an 8-month-old baby, unaware that everything they thought was behind them, was about to resurface. But what led to those 5 seconds? What drove a man to pull the trigger, to make a countdown to a death so cold, so deliberate? To understand what happened that night, we need to look beyond the gunfire, beyond the countdown. We need to uncover the fractures, the hidden resentments, the lives that collided in that one explosive moment. In this story, the seconds aren't just numbers. They're the moments where everything changes. The difference between life and death. And the countdown, well, it's just the beginning of a story that will leave you questioning everything you thought you knew about justice, love, and revenge. This is the story of Sylvester Grice Jordan, Yasmini Rodriguez Fernandez, and a family torn apart in the blink of an eye. This is a story of trust, betrayal, and an unthinkable act that would forever change everything. But as the investigation unfolds, as the truth begins to surface, we'll unravel the mystery behind a life lost too soon and the deadly countdown that sealed its fate. Stay with us, as we dig deeper. What really happened that night? And who truly paid the price? The evening started like any other. A family, reunited in their home, living through their own personal struggles and triumphs. The mundane routine of everyday life, grounded in the comfort of family. But sometimes, it only takes one moment, one uninvited guest, to shatter everything. And that's exactly what happened. The doorbell rang. And standing there, on the other side, was a man from their past, Sylvester Grice Jordan. An ex-boyfriend, someone who had once been a part of the family, someone who had once been trusted. But trust, as they would soon find out, was something Grice Jordan had long abandoned. Yasmini had no idea that the man he had once trusted would soon be the one to take his life. A man who had been with his stepdaughter, a man who had lived in the home just weeks ago, now standing on their doorstep, an uninvited presence that would forever alter the course of their lives. Once upon a time, they had shared moments of camaraderie, maybe even friendship. But the relationship had soured. Grice Jordan's departure from the household was recent, a result of mounting tensions. The family had asked him to leave on December 15, a decision driven by the need for peace. Little did they know, peace was slipping through their fingers faster than they realized. He had left his dog behind, an innocent animal caught in the middle of a family dispute. But it wasn't just about the dog. It was about control, about pride, about a man who had been cast aside and refused to accept it. A man who couldn't let go of the life that had once been his. The conversation that followed was not just a disagreement. It was the beginning of the end. What started as a simple request to retrieve a dog turned into something much darker. An argument between two men, once linked by shared memories, but now divided by anger, resentment, and betrayal. And then, in the blink of an eye, everything changed. A shot rang out. Yasmini's cry of pain echoed into the night, a desperate plea for help, for a life that was slipping away far too quickly. What had been a disagreement had become something far worse, a senseless, brutal act of violence. In that moment, Yasmini's fate was sealed. And with it, the lives of everyone who knew him were forever altered. No one could have known that this one night, the ticking of a clock, the pull of a trigger, would unravel everything. Sylvester Grice Jordan, 32. A man with a turbulent past, his story marked by contradictions and chaos. On the surface, he seemed like just another man trying to navigate life, but beneath the surface, the layers told a different story, a tale of emotional manipulation, unstable relationships, and brushes with the law that painted a disturbing picture of a man whose decisions had spiraled out of control. Grice Jordan's relationship with the Fernandez family was never stable. He had been an ex-boyfriend to Fernandez's stepdaughter, a man who had once been part of the household. For a while, it seemed like a normal situation, one that many families deal with. But the cracks began to show. It was December 15 when Grice Jordan was asked to leave. The Fernandez family, tired of his behavior and their constant conflicts, told him it was time for him to go. It was a decision that would prove to be both necessary and, in a tragic turn of fate, a dangerous one. But even after leaving, Grice Jordan couldn't let go. His dog, the only thing that connected him to the home, was still there. A small thing, yet it became his breaking point. The need for control, the need to prove something, drove him to return. What should have been a simple task, picking up a dog, was, for Grice Jordan, a symbolic act. An act to reclaim control over a life he felt he had lost, a chance to make his presence known once again. But in his mind, the price of this return was already set. The stakes had been raised, and with them, the danger of what would unfold next. Yasmini Rodriguez Fernandez. A father, a husband, a man with the kind of quiet strength that comes from a life lived with purpose. At 33, he was beginning to find peace. After years of struggles, he had built a life with his wife, raising his stepdaughter and caring for the baby he adored. But even in the calm, there were echoes of the past. A past that was never fully put to rest, a past that included Grice Jordan, someone he once trusted, now an unwelcome shadow in his life. Yasmini had tried to move on, to protect his family from the mistakes of the past, but the threads were tangled. And it only took one thread to unravel everything. Yasmini was the protector. The kind of man who would stand in the face of danger to keep his family safe. He had a history of being the stabilizing force, the one who held things together. Yet, on that night, despite his strength, he was powerless to stop what was coming. He could never have anticipated the violence that Grice Jordan would bring back into his life. As the night went on, Yasmini stood between his family and the past that wouldn't leave. His presence, a barrier. But that barrier would soon be broken. That door he opened to a man he once called a friend would become the doorway to tragedy. In a split second, the role of protector would shift. And nothing, not even Yasmini's strength, would be enough to stop the events that were about to unfold. On the evening of December 17, Grice Jordan returned. But not for reconciliation. Not to make peace. He came to reclaim what he thought was his, the dog he had left behind. But what he didn't realize was that this return wasn't just about the dog. It was about power. It was about control. What started as a simple exchange, an effort to retrieve his dog, would soon spiral into something far darker. Something far more deadly. Grice Jordan stepped inside, his eyes fixed on the goal, a reunion with his dog. But there was no greeting, no pleasantries. Instead, the air grew thick with tension as the two men exchanged words. Both armed, both on edge. Yet neither man had drawn his weapon. Instead, they argued, two men, once connected by the same house, now divided by a history of resentment and pain. The argument moved from the safety of the living room to the open air of the porch. A space that once symbolized peace and sanctuary now became the backdrop for a deadly confrontation. As Yasmini stepped outside to continue the argument, he placed his gun on the table. It seemed like a momentary truce, both men temporarily laying down their weapons. But the danger was far from over. The air was thick with tension. Both men were armed, yet neither had drawn their weapons. Their standoff outside the home was more than just a confrontation, it was the final build-up before everything shattered. With each passing second, the situation grew more unstable. The countdown had already begun. Then, in an instant, everything changed. The sound of a single gunshot shattered the night. Yasmani fell to the ground, his body crumpling as the life drained from him. The scream of pain that followed echoed in the silence. His last words, "I've been shot," lingered in the air, a desperate plea for help. In that moment, the violence was real. The man who had once been a part of this family was now the one who ended it. Yasmani's life, once filled with love, ended in the most brutal of ways. But as he lay there, fading, the world inside the house remained unaware of the horror unfolding on the porch just beyond the door. 5 seconds. That's all it took for a life to be lost. And for a family's world to crumble. With Yasmani lying on the ground, barely clinging to life, something chilling happened. Grice Jordan, standing over him, began to count down. Not to stop the violence, but to seal Yasmani's fate. 5 seconds, 5 agonizing seconds, as Yasmani's life played out like a twisted game. A countdown to death that would forever haunt anyone who heard it. 5, 4, 3. The sound of Grice Jordan's voice echoes ominously in the background, while the camera focuses on Yasmani's eyes, wide with fear. His hands tremble as he struggles to push himself up, but he's too weak, too broken. Each second that passes feels like a lifetime, his body growing weaker with each breath. 5 seconds. That was all he had left. With the barrel of a rifle pressing against his head, Fernandez's final moments were measured in silence and the ticking of time. His life, slipping away with each passing second, each number spoken by the man standing above him. And with those final words, the countdown came to an end. Yasmani's life ended in an instant. A man who had only moments before been surrounded by his family, a father, a husband, now, reduced to a lifeless body on the porch. In a matter of seconds, everything changed. A life was lost, a family forever shattered. And the man responsible, standing over the lifeless body, showed no remorse, no hesitation. The countdown had led to this, to a death that could have been avoided if not for the years of tension, the unresolved pain, and the destructive need for control. This was the moment. The moment when everything was lost. And for the Fernandez family, the journey to justice was just beginning. But no matter the outcome, they would never get Yasmani back. The damage was done, and the darkness that had entered their home would never leave. The police arrived to a scene of chaos. A wounded man, his life cut short by a man whose anger and desperation had spiraled out of control. What had begun as a petty confrontation now lay in the aftermath of a senseless death. The investigators had their work cut out for them, piecing together the moments that led to the fatal shot, the emotions that fueled it, and the violence that ended it. Inside the house, Yasmani's wife and daughter were unharmed, but emotionally shaken. They had witnessed the unraveling of a man they once trusted, a man who had been part of their family, now the perpetrator of a tragedy. They hadn't known what would happen when they heard the argument escalate, and they certainly didn't know that Yasmani's final breath would be a consequence of a brutal betrayal. The police were quick to make an arrest. Grice Jordan, captured in the act, was taken into custody and charged with second-degree murder and the use of a weapon in the commission of a felony. But the emotional damage would take far longer to heal. For the Fernandez family, there would be no closure, just the long, painful journey of moving forward, forever haunted by the loss of their loved one. The courtroom became the battleground for justice. Grice Jordan, accused of murder, now faced the weight of his actions. His future, once uncertain, was now in the hands of the legal system. But as the trial unfolded, one question lingered in the air: why did he do it? What could possibly drive a man to take another's life in such a cold and calculated manner? The answer lay somewhere between fractured relationships, deep-seated resentments, and a man unwilling to let go. Bryce Jordan's past, his struggles with control, his volatile behavior, his inability to move on, seemed to paint a picture of a man who would not back down, no matter the cost. But would the truth come to light, or would it remain buried under layers of defense and accusation? To understand why a man would shoot another in cold blood, we must first delve into the psychology behind it. Bryce Jordan was no stranger to conflict, but this particular night marked a breaking point, a moment where all the rage, frustration, and unresolved pain reached their peak. But what made him snap? What drove a man who had once been part of the Fernandez family to pull the trigger with such chilling precision? Was it desperation? Anger? Or was there something darker lurking within him, waiting to emerge? As we peel back the layers, we begin to unravel the mind of a killer, someone who, when faced with a fractured reality, resorted to violence to reclaim what he believed was his. At first glance, the case seemed straightforward. Bryce Jordan, in a fit of rage, shot and killed Yasmini on the porch. But as the investigation continued, new evidence came to light, evidence that started to unravel pieces of the puzzle and cast doubt on the initial narrative. Was this truly a crime of passion, driven by a momentary loss of control? Or was it a carefully calculated act, planned and executed with cold precision? The investigation took a turn. What was once assumed to be a crime of uncontrolled emotion became something far murkier. The more the police dug, the more uncertain everything seemed. Was there more to this story than anyone had originally believed? After months of investigation, the courtroom drama reached its climax. Bryce Jordan, once a man who had been part of the Fernandez family, now faced the consequences of his actions. His fate was in the hands of 12 jurors, as the legal teams presented their final arguments. But the question remained, was justice truly served? The verdict, when it came, was a moment of finality. The jury found Bryce Jordan guilty of second-degree murder. It was a conviction, but was it enough to truly deliver justice for Yasmini and his family? The verdict would leave a mark on the Fernandez family, but the true impact of the crime would be felt in the years to come. The void left by Yasmini's death could never be filled, and no verdict would ever change the grief that would linger in their hearts forever. In the end, the countdown was more than just numbers, it was a life reduced to a series of seconds, each one more precious than the last. Yasmini's life, filled with love and hope, was cut short by the man who once lived under the same roof. A tragic reminder of the danger that lies within when anger and resentment fester, hidden beneath the surface, waiting for the right moment to explode. The question remains, what drives a man to take another's life? In this case, it wasn't just one moment, but a culmination of frustrations, betrayals, and a fractured mind. It was a moment of desperation, a flash of anger, and a countdown that forever changed everything. Bryce Jordan's actions, born out of a need for control, destroyed more than just Yasmini's life, it tore apart a family, forever altering their future. This is the story of Yasmini, and the chilling countdown that ended it all.
Welcome to Shocking True Crime. Thanks to all our viewers and subscribers for your support. Stay with us for daily updates on the most shocking true crime stories. Don't forget to subscribe.